Hello. So today we're going to be going a bit into kind of like the signals, React, solid React, and all of that kind of like drama. And I'm going to take this kind of like at a very like face value, right? Is that genuine question? Please answer. I'm looking into all of this stuff. Like, how do I think about it? And yeah, I'm just going to be doing it as kind of like as the best of my knowledge. On the screenshot we have React, Solid, Svelte, and Vue. Just kind of like all of my biases right out of the way. In my kind of like day-to-day life, I use React and Solid. I don't use Vue and Svelte. Even though Svelte 5 is like pretty close uh, to Solid right now. A lot of the vibes that they have, I don't agree, and there are like some technical decisions that, even though like I try to use to use Svelte for some of the stuff that I need, I just couldn't. Like it's not built for the same thing for me. So with that, kind of like with kind of like my biases, right? Like I'm on the side of React and Solid. Let's kind of like dig into it, right? So this is the thread that I want to kind of like start, and again, that probably will show like my kind of like bias on this, right? Um, so we have the I don't know how to say it, but like the fundamentals, I guess, right? So the fundamentals of uh, I think the right term is reactive programming. I think that was like the oldest kind of like term or whatever, right? And reactive programming would have some sort of thing, right? So that's going to be like atom, state, signal, right? Like whatever the thing is, right? Then there's going to be some sort of like computed, um, derived, right? Whatever the thing is, right? And then there's going to be an effect, right? So like that's the um, how do you say it? That's kind of like the language, right? Like that's the way that you can like think about it, right? Is that like those are the minimal primitives, or I forgot all the like other names for this, right? But that's the things that you need to kind of like talk about like reactive programming, right? And then you have a lot of kind of like people on the side who are like, well, I don't know, like RxJS is kind of like reactive programming, right? Or I don't know, like Redux is kind of like reactive programming, and so on. So yeah, everyone is obviously has their own like ideas of like what this is. But I'm just going to start here, right? And the idea with reactive programming, right, is that signals are kind of like defining the thing that is going to change over time, right? So instead of just like having like a value, right, like one or two, it's like a thing that has a value, right? So the computed or derived or whatever like the memo, I guess, right? Uh, that's the thing that is like using other signals or other derived things and calculates like another value, right? A lot of times it's like read only. I think yeah, different people kind of like over time did different things with it. I think in Angular they are like writable, but in a lot of um, in the simple version, it's just like all the changes are kind of like happening somewhere and they're like flowing into some sort of computed value, right? And effects is the thing that like connects signals to real world, if that makes sense. And de facto, what is happening here is that like effects have both kind of like uh, a lot of time that's both the place where you react on something changing, and you can also like create changes out of effects, right? That's what gets tricky. And if you like old enough and you remember React is not reactive, right? Yeah, I need to find like one from like 12 years ago. That's going to be like the right mindset, right? It's kind of like before hooks. That's when people are like at the height of them being upset about like React not being reactive. um I don't even know how to find it. Yeah. Okay. I'm giving up. But yeah, like the React is not reactive is that like in this is not how React like version 0 worked, right? In React version 0, you had state equals a thing, and you had like this set state, uh, uh, like some new state, right? And you would have like component, I don't know, like will update, right? Like this is, if you squint hard enough, right? Like you can kind of like see how those things are kind of like related, but not kind of like the same thing, right? And that's why everyone was like kind of like saying like React is not reactive, because like reactive means this. So when React became reactive, that was kind of like a pretty big shock, because it's like, well, didn't you all guys told us that like this is not the way, right? And again, like React by default, they're still using like class components and all that stuff, right? But like they're not using that. So like which one of them is which one of them is React, which one of them is reactive? Where am I going with this? When React added hooks, people started to freak out, right? And the freak out was, wait, so React is reactive then, right? Like, are we doing all of this stuff now? Because like we had kind of like libraries that were like kind of like thinking about it in this term, or again like Vue, right? Like Vue is using VDOM, but it would be kind of like using reactive system, kind of like inside and all that stuff. And it's like, well, does that mean that like there is no difference kind of like anymore, right? And that's probably what we're going to see over in some of the discussions. But okay, so this is like my kind of like setup, right? Like for what are we looking at? And um, while those things, they are shaped like this, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are exactly the same, right? So let's kind of like go into this, and let's see how we can like untangle all of this stuff. So my read on React alternative is their primary selling point is at better performance. Well, I guess let's start there, right? Primary selling point is better performance, and it's like, well, maybe not, right? But you go to solid.js website, and the benchmark, right, is like there, right? So like they are not selling people on performance, right? So like it's there, but there are like different ways of kind of like looking at it, right? So a lot of ways that people kind of like on the alternative end, the way that they're selling it is like, yes, but basically their idea is that is like, we don't have overhead, right? Like that's kind of like that's the, if you boil it down, that's their kind of like argument on the performance side, is it's like, well, the performance is kind of like, well, you could make the same thing but just like slower, right? And then like VDOM could be faster, or like React could be faster, or it could be faster at something but like slower at other things, right? But they're like, well, we don't care about like performance for performance sake. We're just saying that like this approach is like closer to the metal, whatever that means, right? And it's like, we don't have to have this layer of like virtual DOM, for example, right? That was like the whole kind of like 𝓼𝓲𝓰𝓷𝓪𝓵𝓼 kind of like idea, is like the library without virtual DOM. And it's like, what is virtual DOM? Like, I don't care about that, right? But like they were like trying to put performance and the simplicity and the overhead kind of like in the same bucket, right? And it's like, well, we are just doing it smarter or simpler or whatever, and that's why we're getting performance. It's not just like it's performance for performance sake. I don't know if I sold that very good, but yeah. So alternative dependency tracking. Again, the thing about this one is that like alternative dependency tracking, it exists in React as well, right? So like in React, you can also have alternative dependency tracking, right? Like you can have Redux, you can have Recoil, right? Or Mobx, right? Like that was like the big one when all of this stuff was happening, right? When React was just showing up, it's like, oh, but React is not reactive. Oh yeah, just add Mobx and it will be reactive, right? So I kind of like don't see that as like a very good argument, but I see what he's kind of like trying to say here, right? It's like, well, if I have kind of like a bunch of components and I have kind of like a prop drilling, like all of my state is on the top of the application, and if I change something, I need to like re-render everything and like repass all the props down to all the children and all that stuff. And it's like, well, if instead of passing the value, I'm getting like the getter for the value, but it's a reactive getter, so like it will make sure that it always reruns in the places that it needs to rerun, right? It's like, well, now I have an alternative dependency tracking, and I'm like, yeah, you can do all of that stuff in React. Like, why are we why are we kind of like saying that, right? But like, it's not going to be React native, right? So it's not going to be kind of like as fast as React in some sense. That's kind of like a thing that like Ryan Carniato likes to point out, right? Is that where was it? I hope I find it. Nope, that's probably not good. Probably not good. Like, that's why I like to have all of this stuff kind of like in advance, so I don't have to spend time looking for it. But yeah, it's like, hey, why are you saying React is slow? I can make it fast with Mobx, and it's like, yes, you can make slow kind of like big React app fast by using Mobx, but you can't make React kind of like itself in the lowest case faster by using Mobx, right? So this is like JS framework benchmark, and we are comparing React and React with Mobx, right? So it's like, obviously you're going to pay for overhead of using Mobx, right? It doesn't mean that like there is an application where they like moved stuff to Mobx and it became faster, but it means that like if you hand roll all of that stuff and use like React Native kind of like ways of doing it, you will probably make it faster, right? Like, so in the, again, kind of like a older kind of like language thinking, right? Like I have like my C program, but like I can inline some assembly and make it faster. Like this is kind of like a C program. There is assembly, and like there is a way for you to inline all of this stuff to get closer to this, right? It's going to be like more brittle, and it's not organized as Mobx and whatnot. So like, but like theoretically, you should be able to get better performance because you can just like skip some of the overhead that you're getting from Mobx. But that doesn't mean that like in realistic application the Mobx is like not faster, right? Because like realistically it's going to be faster, or and the same way goes for like 𝑗ota or something like that, right? Like realistically at some sort of like state of how complex the application is or whatever, moving to Mobx, moving to 𝑗ota, moving to like whatever, like something else for the alternative dependency tracking, right? It will make your application faster. Theoretically, that also means that like you can probably create an example where you're doing things kind of like in solid in the same way with solid, right? Like if you write native solid or if you write solid plus Mobx, like the solid plus Mobx is going to be slower than like raw solid, but theoretically there's probably like an app that is like complex enough or whatever where by moving from native solid stuff to Mobx it will be faster. But no one believes in that, but like everyone believes in that for React, right? It's like it just feels like it is easier to write performant app in solid without using third-party like different dependencies, right? But it doesn't feel like you can take solid application and rewrite with Mobx and it will become faster, right? Which may or may not be true, but it's a interesting kind of like thought anyway. Okay, so we're like one paragraph in. When I look at the APIs, they look identical, right? And it was mostly identical semantics. State thing, right? The effect thing, and the elements. Okay, interesting. So he's going a bit like a different way. He's going a bit like how components are structured. Sure. Okay, interesting. So like when I'm authoring my components, and in my component I'm doing some state thing, some effect thing, and some elements. Okay, but it's not as simple, right? Like when you're passing your stuff to, like, yeah, I wonder if that's like an easy way of explaining that, right? When you're passing that on click here, right? You're saying that like I'm seeing elements, but like this works differently in like different kind of like things, right? Like I would say that the way that elements are connecting to the state thing are different because the way that you are, yeah, I guess like the simple way of like going about this is that for elements, right? It's the render function versus setup function, right? That's kind of like a first argument, right? And maybe that's not the right way. Maybe that's for like state thing and effect thing. That's where that argument works better. State thing, effect thing, right? And for elements, it's almost like a template versus returning VDOM, right? I know that VDOM is not technically the right term. I think it's like element constructor or whatever, but I'm just going to simplify it to VDOM because I think that that like represents what I'm thinking kind of like better. So the first part is the state effect thing. So this works differently, right? So for React, the body of your function is going to rerun all the time, right? So if you put a console log here, like that console log is going to be rerunning. I actually have the kind of like the example, so I wonder if I should just go there, right? And console log rendering, right? So go to console. Like every time that I click on the thing, it's going to render, right? But if I go to setup function, so for example, solid, solid, it's not rendering, it's like setting up solid counter, right? So now if I click on the solid stuff, like nothing happens, right? And I guess how do I say it? This could or could not be obvious, kind of like for you, if you kind of like had experience with this, but this is kind of like the first difference, right? Is that in React, component is the like the unit of the thing that is reactive, right? So like that's why you don't have like a conditional hooks or all that stuff. It's like if something changes, you rerun your component, right? And it gets very tricky to kind of like not do that, right? So in React, if you're doing something for performance, sometimes you can just like let's say you have this counter and like this add and subtract, right? You can do like useEffect, and let's say that you have like some sort of ref, right? And you can find that ref and you can like change the text, right? And you're like, well, I can create kind of like a updater component here, updater, right? I can pass it the ref, and inside of this updater component, with this ref, I can have this useEffect and I can have this count, right? So this way I get rid of the count here, right? So like this way I'm getting the count out of the component, and the only component that is going to re-render is going to be this component, right? And I'm going to inline my useEffect to do this. And like I did this before. Like this is crazy, but like it's not that crazy. You're like, well, because the component is the unit of like the minimal unit that could rerun, right? I can create a component, like empty component, that is going to rerun very fast, right? Because it returns null all the time, like it never kind of like changes anything, and everything that changes I can put in useEffect. This obviously doesn't work well with SSR and all that stuff, but kind of like you see the idea, right? And the similar kind of like idea to this is like, well, and you do this in like in the 𝓼𝓲𝓰𝓷𝓪𝓵𝓼 or whatever it's called, React Fiber 3. I don't care about that, but like it's like the 3D thing, right? So it's like, oh, the first rule of using React for this thing is like never use React state, right? Do everything outside of React kind of like loops, right? What that means is that like you don't do useEffect, you do like Mobx useEffect, right? And you don't do useState, you do like Mobx useState, right? So you do something that is that lives outside of the component, right? So that like the things don't kind of like re-render. This is a very bad example. Let me try to write it like more realistically, right? So we're just going to say that like create my state, right? And it's counter 0, right? And then you do and then maybe you do kind of like you do like state dot I don't know, like on update, right? You do something like this. You talk with a system that lives outside of the React, covering signal drama. Yeah, trying to. So you do this whole thing outside of React, right? And you just have like a ways for your system to talk to that thing, right? So like in this case, like the state needs to know the ref, right? Like it needs to know what element, what DOM element to update, and you're like using React for that, right? Like you're finding the, what is it, like I guess this one, right? Like this one is the ref, right? And it's like, hey, system that lives outside of React, do this, right? And it's like, is that going to be faster than React? It's like, yes, but only in the sense that we're like not using React anymore, right? We're using React to kind of like to set everything up, but like all the updates are happening outside. And again, I did that before. This works. It is faster. If you have like your troubles with like INP or something like that, this is what you're going to do, right? You want to do like a validation, like a form validation. You're like, hey, here's a fix. Don't use declarative kind of like React style bindings. Just create an element, right, and add a useEffect that adds like event listener change, right, and depending on that event listener, like add or remove a class or something like that, right? Like you have to opt out of all of the React to do that. That's the biggest kind of like thing that I think is happening here. Okay, let me let me go all the way back. So that was the like the kind of like the state effect thing, and like how it is connected to components, right? In the solid example, right, my thing already works like that, right? I don't need to go out of my way to invent this thing, or to have like like empty components that are like the minimal unit of re-rendering, to have like the Mobx or whatever, like the external state that doesn't live in React, right? I don't have to do any of this stuff because that's already how it works, right? Like my component, like this stuff, it already works in that mode. It already creates the state that is like not connected to this component, right? It already like does the right. So like if I do like a create effect, right? If I do it here, like that thing already works so that like this code runs without like the component rerunning, right? Like the minimal unit of reactivity here is the callback. And again, you can do that in React, and like you do that in React when you need performance, but this is already like that by default. So the other one was like kind of like the elements, right? And this is where like this is where the difference is happening. Again, like if in React I have this like count, for example, right? I can do like an ify, right? So I can do return count. I need to get all the all the brackets balanced like this. Okay, yeah. So console log in the element, right? So if I have something like this, right? So like this whole thing is going to re-render, right? Like if I add the console log here, like all of this is going to happen, but also like all of this is going to happen, right? And that was a big like innovation of like something like lit. They were saying like, well, you don't need to do that, right? Like you know that like this thing like doesn't change at any point, right? Like so this part could be static, but like the parts that are going into brackets, that like they could change, right? So that's the whole like static things and a whole separate activity inside and all that stuff. But like that's not how React works, right? Like this is a function, right? So like if I have I guess f, right? So like if I just put this as a function that returns things, right? I can just call it here, right? Like for React, this is exactly the same. Like I didn't change anything. Like this is what it does, right? Like there is no understanding of like, oh, this part is static or this part is static and all that stuff. This is going to change this compiler a bit, but for what I'm doing right now, like, yeah, this is true for now. But all the template things here, they work differently, right? So in React, this is going to re-render. In Solid, this is a template that is going to be compiled. Actually, if you go to Solid Playground, I'm sure you can do the same thing for Svelte as well, but I'm just going to I'm just going to do this one and output. Yeah. Let me copy that so it's a bit cleaner to see what's going on, right? So you see that like all of the things that could be static, they are extracted as like a element, I guess, or like a template element. I don't know the right word, but I'm not I'm not like calling anything. So I'm curious if I do a function f and that function returns solid, and I do f here, right? Like how does that change stuff? Where is solid? Yeah, so it has this f, and right. So like now, instead of like this solid thing being like a static part, right? Now solid is like an effect effect that is happening, right? So like I changed what parts of the application, like this part, right? Like I changed what part of the application is static and dynamic by changing the template, but for React it is basically like indistinguishable, right? Like it's like, well, when I'm going to call this div function, that div function ID is going to be solid, and like I have no idea if it was a function or not, right? Like, so like this don't save like this part for React is like I have no idea, right? Like that's your problem. Like is this count static, or is it reactive or not? Like I don't care. Like that's entirely your problem, right? Like in React compiler does kind of like make the elements part a bit different, but for React itself as like a mental model and whatnot, like no. this is not a template. This is like a render function that returns you the VDOM, right? And you are going to like compare that VDOM and like do all of that stuff, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that like this f function is going to be called kind of like all over and over again, right? But the thing that we got in the solid compiler, right? Like for example, this, right? This is not a thing that is going to be called over and over again. This is using the same reactivity that we have here, right? It's using it for rendering as well, right? So not only is the setup function versus render function changes entirely how your state is set up, right? Like the kind of like the part on the top, but it also changes the like how the elements work, right? Like we are not in the like, hey, return me a JSX and kind of like, or VDOM, I don't know the right word, elements, return me elements, right? We are saying, oh, here's a thing, we can use our reactivity layer, and just when we call this function, if this function depends on the reactivity somehow, this effect will subscribe to whatever reactivity it has, right? So like in this case, it just returns solid. Is like it is kind of like a bit of extra work, and they could have like found a way to maybe like optimize it away or whatever. But like that's the mechanism, right? Like it's no longer just rerun the thing and see what it returns. It's like, oh, I know that it could be dynamic, so I'm just going to use my dynamic layer to do it. So again, we're like one paragraph, second paragraph, or like third paragraph deep in, but it's like they are very different, even though they are shaped like I don't know, like there's a green part, there's a red part, there's like a blue part, right? But like they work entirely different, right? Like what am I missing? You're missing how it actually works. People think this is bait, but I'm genuinely curious how people view these libraries and their experience using them. Okay, well, let's get into some of that, I guess. Yeah, I don't know if I want to go there yet. Okay. Yeah, so solid may look like React, right? That's the whole kind of like the whole thing, right? Is that when hooks happened, people are like, why are you stealing my moves, right? Like, we are the people who are like doing it in that shape. Why are you doing the same shape? You're not doing the like how we are doing it, right? Like, why are you using our language? Why are you calling React reactive if it's not, right? Like, why are you shaping it like that if that's not what you're using, right? And the answer was kind of like composability, right? I can have like custom hooks. I can I can't in React. I can't have like in React before hooks, right? I can't have state that is inside of the state, right? As soon as I change state, the component is re-rendered, right? But in React with hooks, I still can't have state inside of the state, but it looks like I could, right? Like, it looks like, oh, like I have my custom hook, and when my custom hook needs a state, it will hook up to the kind of like the global one, right? Like the one that the component owns, right? But I'm only going to be talking about like my counter or my like whatever, like boolean true or false, right? Like, I'm writing it as if this is like a kind of like a piece of reactive data, right? But like, I'm actually just connecting to the component and like telling component, oh, by the way, keep track of this state as well, right? And when I have two hooks, like, well, now if both of them have state, changing in one will cause the change in another, right? And for, again, if you're new to React, you're like, why? Right? And we are like, I don't know how many, like 10, 11 years deep in React, right? We're like, oh, that's why. Like, of course it would change it. But like, if you're a newcomer, you're like, this doesn't make any sense, right? Like, I have this hook and I have that hook. Like, why would they be kind of like calling each other, right? Like, that doesn't make sense. But it's like, well, but that's not the unit. That's not the unit of reactivity. Unit of reactivity is still a component, right? So like, it depends how your component is using that state, right? So like, you get the writing ergonomics of reactive system, but you don't get the runtime ergonomics of it. It kind of translates to performance and the overhead and all that stuff. Where was it? Right? It's like, it does translate to that, but like, uh, okay, I'm probably going to kind of like finish that thought here for now. Welcome to my world. Good luck trying to outperform me, right? Kind of like that, right? It's like, oh, but like, you're doing it wrong. You're doing the like the custom hooks, but like, you are not running them as custom hooks. So it's like, you're going to be worse than we are at this, right? Okay. So yeah, there's so much underneath the surface that is different. Just looking at the picture, the component function will never rerun in solid, right? That's this setup function versus kind of like render function. That leads to wildly different mental model than React rendering. Sure. What tasks are simpler in your experience with this setup plus subscribe versus call the component layer? Yeah. So I think when I was saying, oh, you do that stuff in React sometimes, right? Like, you do need to go kind of like outside of React system and just like, oh, like, this thing is updating too often. I can't use React state for it anymore. I have to use a thing that will like debounce and like save it to React state from time to time, right? Like, that's where that becomes simpler, right? Like, I don't have to change I don't have to play this game of like, I want to use React for declarative, kind of like expressing just like what I want on the screen to happen, with how do I do that in the performant way, right? In if the system is just using, if you're using the same system, or like Mobx, Jotai, whatever, like, if you're using the same system for data that you use for rendering, then you don't have to do that like manual step of like connecting them, right? You already kind of like are in the most performant kind of like mode of it. So so I would say it like you, if you're just doing a counter, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't, until you have like issues with INP and you're like, oh, I see. What I need to do here is like I need to go outside of React system, or I could have just used like a more flexible system, right? That's, I think, where I would kind of like go with that, right? It's like, because like I was I think I have like one of those tweets is about that, but like how I got into React is that like sorry how I got into like this thinking kind of like in React is that like I started using Jotai. I was like, oh, all those tricks that I'm doing with the kind of like empty components that like don't re-render, or sorry, like don't return anything new when they re-render, so that like I can minimize the renders and all that stuff. All of those things, I don't have to get all the way out of like React system. I can use this more like type safe, more kind of like secure and all that stuff system with Jotai. That's kind of like how I got radicalized, right? I was like, oh, like some of those tricks that I'm doing, I can just use the Jotai, right? Or some people can like again like use like Mobx or whatever. Like that's how they think they can do it. Okay, where is it going? Interop with native dollar. I never use that. I don't think it makes sense for like SSR app. So, yeah. Okay, I think he's responding here anymore. Uh, yeah, Svelte useEffect stuff. Okay, well, I guess let's do this one, right? So I use Svelte. We don't use effects, and it's like, yes, I use React. We don't use effect. It kind of like doesn't tell me anything, right? It just um, I don't want to bag on this particular person, but usually that just means that like they're like parroting the thing that they seen on Reddit and they think that they sound smart. uh, sure, who cares? Um, what he's saying is that using facts is not recommended. Why? Yeah. Svelte runes are a new thing that's introduced in version 5. Side effects and Svelte, you can basically like, wait and promise directly on component. Okay. I don't think they are like talking about the same thing. Okay, so have time and set time. You need useEffect and set interval. Okay. In solid, I can set interval because of the setup function, and I clear it up. And as well, yeah. So I think charitable like reading of this is that a lot of times effects are actually more kind of like at home when you're trying to express them as like setup functions versus render functions. The kind of like the timer example is like very like standard, right? So like, or um what's the debounce or something like that, right? It's like thinking about effects as a thing that like re-renders every time that the component re-renders is just kind of like creepy. And in React, like the same useEffect is like you can use it two ways, right? So one is like empty array as a like a dependency array, right? And if React didn't go all the way into like concurrent features and all that stuff, I think kind of like in React 0 versions, right? They would have probably done it with like you have like effect function, and you also have kind of like an onMount function, right? That's kind of like how it was in the class components, right? And that would probably be the API that like people would intuitively kind of like understand better, right? So like stuff like creating a timer or something like that, right? Just do that on mount, right, and clean it up once like the mount is off. But the I should probably write it down though. Uh, it's the kind of like the create timer in useEffect, right? If React had something like useOnMount, it would have made it would be like that would be easier, but it doesn't work with concurrent. So I think that's kind of like what happened. Is that like if the hooks happened kind of like before concurrent mode, we would probably had like different hooks, and those would be not as different from the like kind of like this whole argument wouldn't have kind of like worked too much, but because they were already doing concurrent mode, then they said, oh, actually the like the cleaner version, the right mathematical version is this, and they did the like the more mathematical version, and no one understands how it works, right? Like that's why effects are like hated kind of like more in the in React than they're like in other places, because they have like more semantics compared to kind of like other systems, just because those systems like for the longest time like they didn't have suspense, or they didn't have like the same kind of like rules and all that stuff. So but that's kind of like advanced thing. Like I think for juniors, they don't care about any of that stuff. It just feels like the svelte version is easier. I don't have like a very much very much like sympathy for that. So I don't know. Okay, so so we did this. Are there any like other serious ones, or are we going into memes? Okay, I think we are going into memes, right? So signals, right? The kind of like my reading on this is that what happened over the last few years, right? So I think Ryan Carniato just like started doing his streams, started like explaining stuff on Twitter and all that stuff, and everyone who wanted to listen, they started to listen, and they understood what he's selling, right? He's like, well, I can do React hooks better than React hooks, and everyone's like, I have like 10 counter examples how I don't believe you, and he just like over the years just addressed all of them, and everyone who listened to what he was saying, they're like, well, I guess you're right. Like I don't have anything more. Like I tried all of my counter arguments, and you convinced me, right? That's what happened basically. So that's why everyone, right? Everyone just like moved to it. Everyone moved to signals, and everyone's like, well, that's the best system. Like I don't know what to tell you, right? Like we tried. Like that's the best system. And of course, kind of like remix guys were like too busy with other stuff, right? Like they were not ones who listened, right? So now they're coming into this as like, oh, like what happened? Like every piece of furniture is like in a different place. Like why are we doing this, right? And from the outside, it seems a bit of like cultish or whatever. It's like, why are you guys like randomly like jumping in, right? But then themselves, right, is like someone like in the remix team is like, oh yeah, by the way, Vite is better. Like here is a branch where Vite is better, right? It's like no one just did that for signals yet, right? Like no one at remix kind of like went ahead and just like implemented it and like showed that it's better. And well, just give them time, right? It's like but I understand how kind of like crazy that kind of like looks from the outside, right? Like when they like for the few years that they were like too busy like selling this stuff to Shopify, like everything changed under them, right? And it's like, why are people talking about signals? So like we tried signals 10 years ago. I was like, oh, but that's a different signals, right? And they just like didn't catch that yet. Okay, so curious if you're overcoming or embracing the constraints that lead to if and each. Yeah, it's not if, it's show in solid, but yeah, again, just they don't care enough. The if and each is not a limitation. Basically, like they could have like fixed it. I'm pretty sure like Svelte guys will probably have something to like to fix it. They just like don't care enough about that, and yeah, I'm sure that like Svelte or like Angular or something like that, they don't have like show and each show or for components or whatnot, or like if or each as Ken calls them. This whole argument, like I just like don't care. I'm just going to say it. Yeah. So this one is like how to say it? Get with the times boomers. Right. So for this one, it's just a choice, right? Like other systems like don't use JSX. They use like their own templating, and just like for JSX, it was like for JSX and Solid, it was just kind of like easier to do show and for. It doesn't like matter like one bit if you have Solid correctly set up. So for example, like if I have like a class name here, usually you just have like autofix. Oh, do I have autofix? Yeah, so this one's if you have ASLint set up with solid rules, which I'm guess like this one will probably have, right? So like if I have class name, yeah, it doesn't show the quick fix, but like usually you can just run ESLint --fix and it just like fixes it, right? Like it will rename class name to class. It will do the like if you have if you have like a ternary or whatever, it will like convert it to show. If you have like a map, it converted to 4. It's like it's a solved problem, and it's just like, yeah, again, like if you didn't use Solid with like the proper setup, you might think that this is like a real thing. It's not a real thing. Just like, again, get with the times, use ESLint --to fix, right? So like it's not a thing. You could have done it differently. They just don't care enough. Yeah, so people who are disillusioned with React think signals are going to save them. I disagree. I don't think it's like related to any of that stuff at all, right? So people who are disillusioned with React is like Angular, right? Angular didn't like React for 11 years, right? So Angular was disillusioned with React. Why did it use signals in the last few years, right? Like, that's not just like not true. There are quite a movement at the moment. Again, that happened a few years ago. You guys are just like too late on the train. So it just, yeah, it was quite a movement a few years ago. It's the main piece of feedback I get when I go on my React rants. Right. So, and this is probably and this is probably like the thing that I kind of like wanted to talk more about, is that I was the early solid reply guy, right? So like I've got banned on Twitter for like things. It's like, oh yeah, but Solid has that, and I actually got banned by Ryan Flores, right? Like, sure, it feels kind of like annoying when for anything that you say online, like the answer is like, yeah, but did you look at the signals yet? Because it's like a lot of it is true. A lot of it is just annoying guys who are like trying to be contrarian or whatever, like his point is, right? But a lot of it, unfortunately, is true, right? It's like uh, Solid had like server functions first, right? Solid had like streaming first, right? So Solid had a lot of those things first, and they like inspired with the current kind of like signal stuff, right? It's like, is that annoying? Yes. Are they right? Also yes. So is there reasons to be upset with React that are not solved by Solid or like signals? Yes, I think they are. Is it annoying that the guy who is telling us that he fixes React doesn't know signals? Yes, also true, right? So like, uh, it is how do I say it? Like when you're listening to Ryan Carniato and he's like, I don't care about Svelte, I think my thing is better. And you're like, well, have you tried Svelte? And he's like, well, I looked into compiler and all that stuff. You're like, okay, well, that makes sense. I agree with you, right? And then when you hear like Reach saying is like, oh, I don't care about Solid, and you're like, hey, have you tried Solid? It's like, no, right? And it's like, well, I will wait for you to try Solid before I can like take your kind of like stuff kind of like too seriously, right? And once he tried Solid, once Dominic like wrote kind of like Svelte 5 for him, he's like, oh yeah, those guys were actually right. And it's like, well, I would rather hear Reach now, once he already tried that, than Reach kind of like a few years ago before he tried that, right? So the kind of like the annoying thing about like MJ is, right, is like he's like, hey, I think our thing is better. And it's like, have you tried the other thing? It's like, no, right? And it's like, well, cool. Tell us once you tried it, right? So like, so this is don't tell us it's not good until you try it, right? So um is it annoying that like he gets bombarded with this stuff? Yes. Is it annoying that he didn't look into that stuff? Also yes. So yeah, can't really solve that one. Okay. Oh yeah, you're probably getting all React haters in mentions, and like yeah, React is the worst signals. Yeah, and again, the same thing for like, hey, I want to make a thing that is better than Webpack, and it's like, did you try Vite yet? Right? Because like that's the feedback that they were getting for 2 years, right? Is like, uh, we did Webpack better, right? That was their thing, right? It's like they're like, oh, we don't need Webpack, we have like ES build, and it's like, have you tried Vite? They're like, no, like our thing is better, and it's like, is it better? Well, at some things, right? But like de facto they moved to Vite, right? So it's like, it is just like annoying hearing how much their thing is better than Webpack when you know about Vite, right? So like, so I'm seeing it like that, right? It is annoying hearing them how like their thing is so much better than React. Is like, yeah, we also have a thing that is better than React. Why are we talking about it? Okay. And yeah, speaking of things being annoying, it's the same thing for functional programming, right? It's like, hey, I have this thing like not working in my C++ thing. It's like, yeah, we already solved that in like Rust or whatever, right? Like, is it annoying to hear that? Yes. Is it annoying that you are saying that like the new C++ version better than like the old C++ version while we have Rust? Kind of like also annoying, right? So yeah, I don't really I don't really know how to solve that one. It is annoying on the both sides. Okay, so I think that was the thread that like got spicy because obviously even you jumped in and played interference. Anyway, solid reply guys are in full force. Yes, we are. Dev was here in chat. Yes, we, yes, we are. We are pretty noisy. Okay, so yeah, why would you choose Preact? Yeah, Preact is like, I don't know how to say it. It's like Preact is kind of like the ES built in that analogy. Is like it is good, and it is good at what it does, but it's like it's not as good as if it was a thing that like actually can like solve the problem, but like instead of just having like a small workarounds. Okay, so you're not React. Sorry, you're not solid reply guy. You're just talking about solid, and sometimes you're replying. I got it. Okay, got you, Dev. Okay. Yeah, so like isn't signal subjectively better? I'm not like very big on the objectively better thing. Not really. Right. So I think everything has its own kind of like ups and downs, and you also have the practical things, right? Like solid is like pretty messy in terms of like how they're exporting their packages. I have like some issues with that. Solid is pretty kind of like bad with their like compiler based on Babel and all that stuff. And it's like, sure, like does it matter for signals discussion or anything like that, right? But like it matters for like a production kind of like deployment, right? So or the same thing for like there was like this drama where like um effect was like included twice with two different versions of effect in the same application, and it was like breaking for Next.js on Vercel or whatever. It's like, who is to blame here? Who did it? Who did the like the wrong thing? And it's like, well, like in production, you have a lot of like different things breaking, right? And like saying that like something is like objectively better is like, well, but also I don't know, like the ecosystem and whatnot and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know. Like I'm not going to go into like objectively better territory. But yeah, I would just chuck it into like it is annoying that like people are saying like, oh, we tried signals 10 years ago and they didn't work, and it's like, well, cool. Like I'm going to wait until you try it for real, and then I'm going to hear your opinion. Okay. Dev just sent the link. The thing that you can get you can do is yeah, so he was asking like what can I do here that like not the same thing, right? And I was going into kind of like the performance stuff because that's how I kind of like got into that. I was doing some performance stuff where I had to go kind of like all the way out of React, and I'm like, what you can do with signal stuff is like you don't have to go all the way out of it. Mutable stores. I don't know what mutable stores are. This is what made solid trial demo more efficient than others, especially React versions, right? You can keep a giant up. Yeah, I'm guessing that's like the Mobx thing, right? Where you just have a store of all the data that exists in the application, and it subscribes only to the changes that like it cares about. You can give a giant object of all the cars and columns in the state, update the title. Yeah, you're updating. Yeah, and that's kind of like the 𝓲𝓰𝓷𝓪𝓵𝓼 argument again. This is like again kind of like a bit of like performance angle, right? Which is like you could of course do that in React. It's just going to be very annoying, and you might need to jump out of the React kind of like a declarative things. But isn't it cool that you can just like integrate with kind of like a Mobx thing in Solid easier than the yeah. I don't know if you like ever seen like how Mobx integrates with React, and it's like, wow, this is not React. Like, why are we doing this? That was kind of like why I didn't use Mobx. I was like, well, React is fine. Like, I don't need those escape hatches all the time. Like, why am I not writing React in my technical kind of like React application with Mobx? But here is like, well, I'm writing Solid all the way through. I don't need to kind of like escape out of it in any way. Doing immutability with React is like driving car by trying to what? By tying it to the back of the bus. Okay, sure. you can kick up a giant object for all the cards and columns. Like again, like I was pretty happy with 𝑔ηαℎ and React, so like I didn't have like that experience like too much. You can keep a giant object of all cards and columns in a state, update the title, and only one thing is going to update it. Yeah, so like it is connected all the way to DOM, which I think Preact is also doing. So yeah, immutable updates require all the objects to be cloned and replaced. And again, like immutable.js was doing that, or like Clojure script is doing that, and it works fine. If you have memo filter relevant to column filters, you need to rerun an update with title. With immutable, you have no choice but to clone it. Yeah, this huge sync engine optimization. Yeah, so it is like you can think of, or you can look at it and say like, oh, so it just like we're just talking about performance thing, right? But it's like we're talking about like the using like the same abstraction. That's kind of like how I see it. It's like I can use the same abstraction for everything solid, and I can't use the same abstraction for everything React. Like at some point I will have to jump out of it. Okay, did you finish with this one? I find it hard to digest your conclusion when you haven't really built anything with. Yeah, you sound like 𝓤𝓲𝓰𝓷𝓪𝓵𝓼. Yeah, 𝓤𝓲𝓰 was also like one of those examples where it's like, this looks ugly, and it's like, yes, we agree. And it's like, I don't want to use it, but like you should use it. You like once you use it, you will understand what's going on. You missed the last one. Okay, what did I miss? I can keep going to talk about the crazy capabilities around the thing. Right, like the newer features and like Solid 2 stuff. Right, which all goes much further than alternative ways. Yeah. Yeah, well, the problem is that like they don't care. Like they don't know even the basics. So like saying them is like, I can do suspense better. Like I don't know how. Right? It just they're just like not there. I'm not here to bash on anyone's favorite technology. He asked me directly. Okay, so signals are not new technology, right? So that's the one that is like the most annoying. It is. Right, so so that's the whole kind of like argument, right? Is that like the signals are kind of like inspired by the stuff that was happening with like with like knockout, right? You do kind of like infinite loops, or the like the funny this like when you like type into an input and your selector starts to jump up and down, and it's like, what is going on, right? Like it's like all the it's not what is it, the kind of bindings or double bindings, linked bindings, I forgot how it's called, right? When you like, oh, like this element is that state, right? Like when an element changes, change the state. When the thing changes like that way, change the thing, right? Like I forgot what it was called, like linked state bindings. Yeah, if anyone remembers the name, let me know. But like it's not like that kind of like v input or v model. Yeah, in Vue is like a v model, so you're like, hey, like this input is handled by this thing, right? Like we're not doing any of that stuff anymore. Like it is new technology. It is like, why are you not believing that? The idea of observing changes in your data layer in order to know when update you goes back a long ways. Yeah, so I think it's kind of like two parts here, right? And that's kind of like where I started. So one is the whole layer of like setting things up, right? So like if this state changes, I need to react to that, right? It is already kind of like different in React, but you can do that with like some sort of like a external system. But also like the way that it connects to the elements is also different, right? So like so there are like two steps that you're like skipping here. Before Solid ever existed, sure. Ember was there, yeah. And again, like if you're looking at it as Ember, right? If you're looking at it as a like knockout, it's like, yes, we also did a thing that is better than Ember and knockout, and like, and you missed that part. Um, I've only doubled in Solid, but I can see where the road leads to the computer properties and the web of data dependencies. I think that's true, and that's kind of like that's the stuff that like Ryan Carniato talks about, right? It's like, well, uh, it's like I'm getting like a new fetch with all the new like stock tickers. How do I know which of the like the thousands of signals that exist somewhere in the app like I need to update, right? And I think the like the devs answer about like just, well, just create a store and just like have a thing that like saves to the store and have a things that react to the store is probably the answer. uh, so it's like new version of stores probably fixes that, right? So I see where he's going with that, and I think it is solved kind of like pretty well today. So I don't see how it like practically is a problem. But I'm also seeing this as like something that like will probably be fixed. Okay, Dev is sending more links. Hey, I was going to stream for like half an hour, like, and you're making it hard. Okay, that's another thread. Um, did you just post it? What is going on? 50 seconds. Why? Okay, I'm going to finish this one first. Um, yeah, I prefer the system from like top down. Right. So I think this is a real thing. I think in the sea of people saying signals are better, I think React still has uh, I think React model still makes sense. Uh, right. I don't remember, but I think like Dan Abramov said this thing kind of like said this at some point, is like um when we were doing React, no one was doing the thing that we were doing, and we wanted that approach to be available. We didn't know that it's going to be, again, Dan didn't create React, but like his was just like, I think like rephrasing it from someone who kind of like did, right? But like we wanted this approach to exist. We didn't want it to be the like the best one, or like the like the most used one or whatever. Like that wasn't the part. It's like we were thinking that the like the knockout way will kind of like win, but we wanted to show our version of how it should be. And maybe React shouldn't be like used everywhere, right? Maybe that shouldn't be the default, but it is still like a cool system, and I want it to exist kind of like forever. Like I want to use React forever, and I'm completely on board with that. I think React system is different. It does make sense for like what they're doing. It does make sense for like, wouldn't it be easier to think about like your application as if you're doing PHP, right? And like one button clicked, you are like you are kind of like just like rerunning everything. I think the answer is yes. Like I'm on that board. None of the arguments that you're bringing up in this thread are like about this. That's the problem. That is my problem. It is much more predictable, right? Until you get into like all the same issues that we get with all the same stuff. So yeah, uh, I think it's just like easier to explain it from like the top down of like, well, then we render the application, and then we render that and render that. But like that abstraction breaks down at some point, right? Like at some point you don't think about it like that anymore. You're thinking about it in a more like, oh, I'm trying to optimize it. Why does this re-render and all that stuff? And once you're in that camp where like I am, right, like where I need to care about React performance, I get into trouble with React model, right? And I need to get out of the React. Um, might ask yourself, we're so confident about React when it has yet to be proven. Yeah. So this is like, if you're so smart, why you're not rich, right? It's like, if Solid is so good, why is it not popular? Sure. Why isn't it popular? We'll see. Nobody has built an app with like, yeah. So, like, I've seen pretty big apps, so I don't know. Meh. Like, I think it's, again, like, you're getting into this as like, hey, I didn't see any progress what was happening for web in the last 5 years, and my assumption is that like nothing happened. And it's like, yeah, that assumption is just wrong. Like, yeah, I don't really know what to say about this. Yeah, scalability, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so Ivan is even. I always forget how to say his name, right? Like, jumping on this train is like, oh, but like, we technically have signals, right? And it's like, it is kind of like technically signals in the same way as like Ember is technically even. Even. I don't know. I know it, but then I forget it. There is my father name is Ivan in Russian, so like I always go there and I'm like, no, that's the wrong one. even you. I think that, yeah, that's probably the right one. Anyway, so like, well, technically Vue was using signals since like Vue 2, right? So it's like, and there are like huge applications. So it's like, and again, like, we had pretty big applications with knockout and all that stuff. So it's like, even the wrong version of signals can be used at scale. It just starts to break down. And the same way as like React could be used at scale, but at some point it starts to break down. So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like nonsense. Vue didn't invent signals, right? So that one is interesting, right? So like, in the same way as I'm saying that like this one, right, is like, yes, signals are new, right? Like the signals as they are right now, the right the signals 1.0 is solid svelte 5 view vapor, right? So that means also like using signals for rendering and like and authoring and all that stuff, right? And having like stores and all that stuff. So like does Preact have signals? Sure. Does Angular have signals? Sure. Like Qt has signals, right? Like, but they are not exactly kind of like the same. This is like, people have like a very specific kind of like understanding of signals, kind of like 1.0, and like this is what they mean. So when you're stretching and saying like, I've seen Ember applications being not performance, so signals are bad, and you're also stretching saying like, well, I've seen big Vue apps and they are good. I think they're both kind of like not very like applicable, but again, like, I think both arguments are kind of like silly. Oh, interesting. According to Ryan, Signals 1.5 is solid, but Signals 1.0 is Mobx, JTAG view, and composable. Yeah. I would go the other way around, right? I would call they like Signals 0.5, right? Like JTAG is like Signals 0.5, whereas like it is kind of like that thing, but like not the whole stack. And like, once it was the whole stack, once it was solid, that's when we were like, signals are good, right? Okay, I need to really like speed up my stuff. It's already an hour. Okay. I'm not. We didn't invent signals. Sure. Again, like, no one, even like, even Ryan sometimes was like, oh, I don't know if I invented signals, right? Like, we just used SJS. I'm saying we can build a large apps with signals. Yes, and I think that's sure, of course. Yes, exactly. Yes. Right. And have been successful 2 years. Your whole take of signals are very, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it just it just like sounded good in his mind, and he decided to say that. Interesting that like all of it is marked as spam. Okay. Yeah. So now the like the Ryan's article about kind of like how the signals are. Okay, need to get the dev stuff as well. Yeah, so this is article from like 2023, right? Again, like I wish they had time to read that article like a year ago, right? Or 2 years ago, or or whatever, right? But they're busy like with different stuff, right? And he's kind of like going about like the kind of like the like, is React reactive, right? Like what do we call reactive, right? It's the thing, it's computed from the thing, and it's like an effect from the thing, right? And when React was kind of like showing up, right? They were like, hey, our way is better, right? But then something like Mobx, they're like, well, I think you're gonna kind of like mix and match both and get the like the declarative and kind of like the glitch-free kind of like thing, but like get the performance from that, right? Yeah. So there are like a few steps in like getting there. I just want to say that, yeah, I just want to say that like the real signals, right, are all of those things. Right? It's like the way that how they connect to DOM, the way that how you do the kind of like the authoring, the way that you do the, let's say, like the scheduling, right? Like it all has to be there, otherwise it's just like sparkling reactivity, right? It's not signals. Okay, so let's get the devs thing, and we'll probably call it a day. So which one do you read? I think this one, right? The dependency tracking. Yeah. So when I look at the DPI, I look at the article, mostly the semantics. I recommend giving a more serious try before making adjustments on them. I did not like Remix v2 while just looking at the APIs, but when I started contributing to the project using it, I realized how powerful and nice patterns are. Shifted look, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. So with that, I think I'm going to just like end it here. What have we learned here? Right? It is true that the like the surface level React kind of like ended up looking like signals. It is true that it is much more like reactive programming now that it kind of like ever was, but I also think that like React has like a very specific idea of like how like things should be authored. It doesn't mean that like with compiler and all of that stuff, right? Like this, the way that the runtime works is going to be changing. I think, and again, someone like at React said at some point, it's like, yeah, if we find signals like important or good for like implementation detail, we could of course do it, right? Like it like we don't care, right? It just the like the authoring experience is what we want to preserve, right? So in the React world, that means that like having like a console log inside of component will re-render the console log, right? That's going to be changing with compiler, right? It is very like legitimate of like, hey, don't you just want to give up on the thing that you're doing and just like switch it all the way to signals if it already looks a lot like signals? And the answer that they are giving is kind of like no. And the questions for like, but is it going to make sense? Do I have to like escape hatch from React all the time like I do right now? And all of those like other kind of like ergonomics, right? And they're like, we don't know yet. And again, like all of my biases, like I think React is fine, right? I think they're doing the like the important job of like trying to figure out if you can do this like conceptually PHP, but actually kind of like thing that like still works, right? React was never performant, right? Like they, when they were like presenting React on like the first conference, they said we were surprised that we can get 60 FPS on mobile, right? And we were like, okay, well that's good enough. Like we don't need to worry about that much more, right? They don't care about performance, right? Like that's just kind of like there, and I think that's a fine and kind of like approach, right? Like uh, they are using PHP for God's sakes, right? Like in Meta in 2025, right? Like they think it's good enough. They're using React. They think it's good enough. They think that the mental model and the kind of like the scalability, whatever they have, kind of like inside of it. I think they kind of like think that it's good. I'm glad that they have like a React team. I'm glad that like people on the React team are kind of like still making kind of like that idea alive. Would I be glad if they actually knew how like solid works, or like how kind of like modern signal other like implementation works? Sure. Would I be glad if they like knew how like Astro works? Right? And it's like, oh, overreacted. Right? Astro. Right? Was I happy on the May 6th, 2021, when Dan actually tried Astro and he actually like understood what that means and like how it relates to React Store components. I was very glad, right? Like I think this is great. Would it be cool if like more people on the React team kind of like understood how like what are the trade-offs and all that stuff on signals? Sure, that would be very good. Are kind of like MJ and Ryan Flores really like in a position to do that? Like I don't see it yet. I don't think they kind of like connected enough or like care enough about what's happening right now to kind of like to look into that. But wouldn't it be cool if like Dan wrote an article about Solid where he actually tried it and he actually like understood the difference, and he understood the Solid as it is right now instead of like Ember as it was 10 years ago? Yeah, I'm waiting for that instead. Okay, I think that's kind of it. Let me check the chat. uh Dylan describes to Michael Jackson how remix will work in a couple of years. Who's Dylan? I don't remember who's Dylan. Yeah, I'm probably not going to find it by this. Yeah. If you send me a link, I will take a look, because I'm really bad with names. So, but yeah, my joke was about like the Dominic, like Dylan from Arca. Oh, I see. My joke was about like Solid, uh, like when Dominic explained a reach, kind of like how signals work, right? It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it's like, yeah, someone at Remix team eventually will like explain them what how it works, and yeah, I can just wait for that. Oh yeah, why would you need SSR? Yeah, those were the times, right? And again, like I'm fine. uh, Remix added streaming, and it like inspired like the whole generation of frameworks, right? Like they did it the same, kind of like 𝓲𝓰𝓷𝓪𝓵𝓼 generation, all that stuff, right? And I guess like Knox 3, right? Sure, that will happen. Like they can be late on things, so that's fine. Yeah, I think that's it. And let me turn off the YouTubes. I don't know, like and subscribe or something. um, I wish this was much shorter so that I can like send this to MJ and Ryan Flores. If I had more time, like my letter would have been shorter, right? Like, I wish I could make it like a shorter version of this. But yeah, um, I don't know how to put all this stuff into it. I don't know how to put all of this stuff in like 5 minutes. But yeah. Yeah, thanks everyone who jumped in, and yeah.